Hello, fellow seekers. Welcome back to the Law of One Spiritual Advice podcast. My name is Elle, and I return today to speak on some spiritual philosophy linked up with the Law of One quotes to share with you my opinions on the matter. So today I have an interesting one, which I think is very, very important, and that is going to be about how to navigate your emotions. More specifically, how your emotions will help you understand yourself and reveal yourself to yourself. And I know that sounds a little complicated, but we're also going to tie it into how to find the most appropriate chakra that the emotion sort of is being born from, or is where the reaction of the emotion is coming from in the chakra. And then, with that, you're going to figure out how to find blockages within yourself, basically how to navigate your emotions to better reveal yourself to yourself so that you can keep going along this path instead of running around like a victim, blaming everyone. You can be brutally honest with yourself and understand that everything comes from self. Self teaches self, and self is revealed through self, and you do that by basically observing yourself and your reactions to things and taking it from there in terms of learning how to balance those reactions and your perceptions. So I have a number of quotes lined up for you. I'm just going to start with a very simple one that shows you how to understand yourself is to basically understand the workings of your chakras. So it says here in session 1512, the questioner asks, how does an individual go about balancing himself? What is the first step? Ra answers, I am Ra. These steps are only one. That is, an understanding of the energy centers which make up the mind-body-spirit complex. End of quote. So, Ra does go on to then go through every single chakra to give you an understanding of them, and I may do that as well, but before we do that, it's basically just want to give you a low-level idea of how this works. So pretty much you get triggered by some sort of experience. That trigger within you is born from an emotional response. Like when you get triggered, essentially is your emotions coming up to a point where you have to react. So as you react and you watch yourself react to different things, you basically need to understand where those biases and those reactions are coming from. Are they always coming from a lower level chakra place, which would mean like a lower instinctual level? Are you always reacting from a place of fear and survival? Or are you maybe reacting from the higher chakras, which, they still have to come through the lower ones, but if you've brought the energy up to, say, the heart, then you may be reacting from a place of compassion and understanding and love. And so, you don't want to put the cart before the horse. You do need to work your chakras one through the next. So you're going to need to balance the bottom survival ones until you can make it up into the heart and have that perception of love and understanding for other selves. But basically, an easy way to sort of determine, well, have you made it to your heart or not, is are you getting emotional reactions to things that basically aren't understanding, aren't of compassion, aren't of love? Well, then great, you've been given a gift. The gift of anger, the gift of distortion, the gift of frustration. You get to find where within you, below the heart, that manifestation lies within you. Where is it being born from? Yes, there's other people out there who are terrible people and are going to victimize you and do this and that, but it is your perception as to how you see these people and what they're doing to you and your reactions that really matter. And when it comes down to it, your reactions are the only thing that you have control of. You don't have control over other people. So it's better to put your reactions into a place that is helpful instead of a place that is maybe the antithesis of helpful, which is to maybe be like, oh, I'm a victim, and now the outside world is just keeps being evil to me, and no matter what I do, right, I can't move forward within myself, etc., etc. Well, my friend, that is a faulty perception, let's say. It is better to know that you hold the responsibility within yourself. You got to be brutally honest with yourself about these things so that you can basically not be suppressing and coping and avoiding your issues, instead dealing with them head on. And we do that by being honest about our reactions to things, and instead of putting them necessarily on other people, we internalize the trigger and see where that leads us to. So I'm going to read you another quote from Ra, and this one is about how, the body is a creature of the mind, but this is going to highlight how the emotions basically affect the body complex. So it says here in session 5.2, Ra says, "It is necessary to know your body well. This is a matter of using the mind to examine how the feelings, the biases, what you would call the emotions, affect various portions of the body complex. It shall be necessary to both understand the bodily polarities and to accept them, repeating in a chemical physical manifestation the work you have done upon the mind bethinking the consciousness." End of quote. So here again, right, it just says this is a matter of using the mind to examine the feelings, the biases, and what you would call the emotions and how they affect the body complex. So think to yourself, when you get into a very stressful time in your life, there's a lot of pressure on the mind and it's feeling, well, let's say constrained or whatever you would like to call it. But basically the mind is coming into a place of, let's say, non-health, right? Like you're not in a gratitude, like being grateful type of attitude. You're not open to the wonders of the world. Like you're very closed down, and the emotions are heavy and they weigh heavy within your mind. Well, what often happens when we are behaving that way? We get sick, right? I mean, whether you want to think of it physically, metaphysically, I don't really care, because I believe both angles are to be true. The stress brings down the immune system, etc., which welcomes in sickness, so that the sickness can reveal self to self and come to healing, right? To heal the self both physically and metaphysically within the mind, because as we heal the physical, we also heal the metaphysical, and vice versa. They're both, intimately connected. So when I explain some of this too, I do want to just sort of highlight the importance that although there's a lot of talk about physical, a lot of this is just a psychological nudge for your body. So in session 40.14, Ra states, "We underline and emphasize that this information is not to be understood literally, but as a link or psychological nudge for the body and the mind and the spirit. Thus, it is the care and respect for the self that is the true thing of importance." End of quote. Okay, so I like this quote because they say right here, "Thus, it is the care and respect for the self that is the true thing of importance." I think of that like it's sometimes people want a perfect formula as to health, as to healing, as to how to unblock themselves, how to move forward, how to not trick themselves. And I mean, it honestly is just brutal honesty with yourself. And do you have care and respect for yourself? You need to ask yourself that honestly and give yourself an honest answer. If the honest answer isn't, of course, of course I respect myself. Of course I love myself. Of course I want the best for, the entity that it is me in this incarnation. I wish to serve others, but obviously I can't pour from an empty cup. I need to take care of myself. And so if you're basically not feeling that way, well, there's a little heads up as to where you could do better within yourself, which is probably going to come in the form of forgiveness of yourself, forgiveness of others. Everything will be reconciled sometime within your life. It's not up to you to necessarily take control of everything. It's more just about you have respect for yourself in a honest and caring way. And as you can do that, you can then, extend that care and love outwards to other selves. It's like, I can think of this in chakra terms, right? If you're blocked off from the energy of the universe, what do you have to give but the limited energy from the self? Whereas if you've opened up all the chakras and opened yourself up to infinity, I mean, infinity flows through you. You are with endless gifts. There is no limit to what you can give because it's just infinity running through you. Okay, so then also linking in the idea that this is a lot of mind work, okay, is this quote here in session 40.14. It sort of continued. So there were in the questioner asked Ra about diet. What should the person do for the ultimate best diet? And, basically Ra did give some suggestions, but in their suggestions, they reminded them that, hey, this is just a psychological nudge for the body. It's the care and respect for the self that is sort of the thing of true importance. And then they add on here in terms of purging. So if you maybe had to purge something from the body, and they talk about fasting in this regard. And so I'm just reading this to you so you understand the link between the physical and the metaphysical. Sometimes we still need to do things in the physical to facilitate metaphysical healing. So in session 40.14, they state, in addition, though this has not been mentioned, for this instrument is not in need of purification, those entities in need of purging the self of a poisoned thought form or emotion complex do well to take care in following a program of careful fasting until the destructive thought form has been purged analogously by the byproducts of ridding the physical vehicle of excess material. Again, you see the value not to the body complex, but used as a link for the mind and spirit. Thus, self reveals self to self. Right? So once again, a lot of this is navigating your emotions, navigating the mind. How does the thought forms that come into your mind, do they sit well? Do they flow through you nicely? Or do they get pushed up against walls and you don't know where to put them? Well, to me, that's sort of the idea, is like you don't know where to put them in your mind. That's because they're basically getting stuck in certain blockage areas within the chakras, which is essentially like an emotional system, right? It's all about feeling. It's not, I myself, I know there's some people who maybe claim that they could physically look at you and see what chakras are blocked. I don't have that gift. I have sort of this more realistic look at the person, get a feeling for their emotions, and just feel where you think that chakra blockage is coming from. And of course, if you are judging someone else in this regard, you don't do it to judge them. You want to do it to heal them, or at least at minimum, in my perspective, I do this to others where I try to perceive maybe where their chakra blockages are, to help them if I can, if they seek my assistance. But more so, I like to use it as a mirror to reflect on myself. So when I see someone else sort of getting triggered in a certain way, I like to think, where is that trigger probably coming from internally within them? And then I like to think, how do I share some of those same triggers? What do I do that's very similar to what this person is doing? What can I learn from this? So me, this is how I navigate my emotions and even other people's emotions, right? So I have to respect the free will of them to do whatever they want to do with their life. If they seek my assistance, great. But otherwise, I'm just there to simply observe and to have the self teach the self, myself, as to what's being experienced in front of me. And so then, also we would talk more about specifically how do I navigate my internal emotions. Well, make it simple. I get angry, I get upset, even the opposite, to be honest. They don't have to be all negative connotation emotions, right? You get very positive emotions as well. And some of these positive emotions may come from a healthy place, and some honestly might come from a non-healthy place. Like, what if you get pleasure from the lowest level chakra in like the sexual perspective, in that like you're just lusting for things? Well, obviously that's going to bring some form of joy, but it might be a low form of joy that could be elevated to a higher perspective, one which maybe comes, from lust into how does this relate to myself, how does this relate to other selves, and how does this relate to the heart of understanding and love and universal compassion for all, right? So any experience that you think about can be in a succession of chakras, and they all start in lower base survival instinct type chakras, and they're going to get moved up into higher areas. So I suppose, considering that there might be somebody listening to this who isn't fully aware of each chakra, I'll just give you one quick brief explanation that I'm just going to do from my head. So we always start at the bottom chakras. So let's say I have an emotion, an experience, something happens to me. What is the first thing that I react from? Well, I react in terms of survival, right? So that's your first chakra, is the red chakra. It's about survival. What do I need to do to survive this interaction, right? It seems very silly and honest, but it's like you can't do anything past survival if you're not surviving. So the first thing of importance is that, hey, you stay alive for this experience so that you can experience the experience and make sense of it. Okay, so you have your bottom chakra red. We're going to move it up into the orange chakra, which is like the self. It's more like the emotional self, the little self, the you, the internal you that sort of speaks to you. So this is my internal self. It would maybe make more sense when I go into the next chakra, which is the yellow chakra, which is like the communal chakra. So now you've elevated from self into like a community type chakra. So how do I then relate this experience not only to myself and the orange chakra, but into the yellow chakra, the communal one, about my family, my friends, my community, my work, my sports, basically anything that is more than one person. That is group efforts and things along these lines is very much about what we're doing here on Earth, and group energies have a lot of expression here. So basically red, orange, yellow are your bottom three chakras, which then if you have those in sort of minimum balance and activation, you can then move the energy up into the heart of love and understanding, compassion. Universal love was more how it would be. So, to unblock the yellow chakra, they say you must love everyone you know. To unblock the green, the heart chakra, you basically must love everyone that you even don't know. Every personality that you can conceive that exists within you. You are every being, every emotion, every feeling, everything. You are everything. So when you go into the heart, you have to accept the fact that you have all those feelings. You share all these feelings as well in some form, as to like that everyone else in the world has. All the evil thoughts, all the great thoughts, they all are contained within you. The mind contains all. Therefore, it must recognize and reconcile all within the mind. It's not necessarily that the outer needs to be rearranged. It's that the inner needs to make sense of the outer. And within the acceptance from the inner side of things, come harmony on the outside of things. Which brings up the more very complicated thing about this, where, I always want to keep this so simple and short, but it is complicated. So there's a lot of people that would say, well, what if I don't have an emotional response? Or is that the key? Is the key then to the goal to have no emotional response to anything? Am I then perfectly balanced and activated? And I mean, the answer in my words is no, that's wrong. So indifference is not love. Right? We're a universe of love. Love means that, well, you're not indifferent to everything. Like, the unity contains all, so it cannot abhor any. It cannot exclude anything, for it contains all. So the goal is not to necessarily have no emotional response. It's more so, well, I guess it is, but it's not in like a dead feeling kind of way. So more what it is that you see everything with eyes of love. An entity which sees the universe for what it is, which is just various distortions of love running around, trying to figure themselves out, can't necessarily be offended at anything, because, there's just the free will of entities using the infinity of creation to experience the creation as they see fit. And so, rather than you having to sort of physically reconcile everything, you'd rather do it mentally within the mind, and you reconcile that, all is one, all paths lead to the one. Is this a form of sort of spiritual bypassing? It may be, where this is where the brutal honesty thing comes in. You have to decide, hey, am I truly, seeing this with eyes of love, or am I heartless and indifferent watching this? Because really, those are two completely different things. Even both of them, sort of don't elicit an emotional response. They're both different versions of different things. So anyways, here in session 42.9, the questioner asks, what is the difference in terms of energy center activation between a person who represses emotionally charged responses to emotionally charged situations and the person who is balanced and therefore truly unswayed by emotionally charged situations? Ra answers, I am Ra. This query contains an incorrect assumption. To the truly balanced entity, no situation would be emotionally charged. With this understood, we may say the following. The repression of emotions depolarizes the entity insofar as it then chooses not to use the catalytic action of the space-time present in a spontaneous manner, thus dimming the energy centers. This is, however, some polarization towards the positive if the cause of this repression is consideration for other selves. The entity which has worked long enough with the catalyst to be able to feel the catalyst, but not to find it necessary to express reactions, is not yet balanced but suffers no depolarization due to the transparency of its experiential continuum. Thus, the gradual increase in the ability to observe one's reactions and to know the self will bring the self ever closer to a true balance. Patience is requested and suggested, for the catalyst is intense upon your plane, and its use must be appreciated over a period of consistent learned teaching. End of quote. So there's a lot there, and I've definitely read this in previous podcasts, but it is of importance, and there's always more to elaborate on. So they mention here, right, there is a difference between being non-emotionally charged and being emotionally charged. It's all just comes down to whether you're actually being honest about this or you're sort of doing a repression thing. And so it states here that if you're sort of faking it and repressing it, you might not be depolarizing yourself in that you're just trying to be transparent to the situation and not necessarily react in a way which maybe you find negative. But then they state here that, if you do suppress them and it's at least consideration for the other selves, you're doing it from a perspective of service to others, and therefore you don't necessarily depolarize yourself, but you're not necessarily polarizing yourself either, which is just another way of saying, like, you're not necessarily going backwards, but you're not going forwards either. You're just sort of stuck there. So what do they suggest? Well, the gradual increase in the ability to observe one's reactions and to know the self will bring the self ever closer to a truer balance. They also state here, which is really important, they say if they repress the emotions and chooses not to use the catalytic action of space-time present in a spontaneous manner, thus dimming the energy centers. So I talk a lot about spontaneity, and that's because you don't necessarily know yourself as much as you think you know yourself. How do you know yourself? You know yourself by acting spontaneously. The spontaneous reactions that come from yourself are sort of like your true desires, your true self. You like to put on a mask that I'm so mature and I don't get offended at this or that. Well, you're a liar. All of us get offended at certain things. All of us are not mature. There's that little child inside of us, which is a little brat. And I like to admit that brat exists within me. And I think if you, sort of admit that it exists within you, you can be more honest with yourself about the way these emotions are expressing themselves. There's, like I mentioned, spiritual bypassing. A lot of people do this thing where they recognize their emotions, but instead of finding the root of them and finding what chakra they lie in, they instead they do some spiritual bypassing, like, that's this week or this month's, like, downloads from the universe, or, Mercury's in retrograde, so, of course this is why I'm so this way, blah, 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 right? But it's not taking responsibility for the self. As much as outside forces can affect us, they're somewhat irrelevant in that maybe all they really do is help to ruffle the feathers to bring out the truth, as opposed to, making it easier to withhold the truth and live on the surface of things. So be honest with yourself, be spontaneous in your reactions, but then observe the way that you're being spontaneous. And later, before bed or whenever is comfortable for you, go through your day in meditation and contemplation and think of the way you reacted and think, hey, is this the way I wanted to react? Could I have reacted better? And if I did not, why did I not? What within me is stopping me from being a loving, understanding, and compassionate being towards myself and towards others? That's your answer. That's where the distortion lies within you. That's where the blockage lies within you. And they even go on here is it the same session? In the next answer, they ask Ra again, to sort of clarify this topic. So they say, how can a person know when he is unswayed by an emotionally charged situation if he is repressing the flow of emotions, or if he is in balance and truly unswayed? Ra answers, I am Ra. We have spoken to this point, therefore we shall briefly iterate that to the balanced entity, no situation has an emotional charge, but is simply a situation like any other in which the entity may or may not observe an opportunity to be of service. The closer an entity comes to this attitude, the closer an entity is to balance. You may note that it is not our recommendation that reactions to catalysts be repressed or suppressed unless such reactions would be a stumbling block not consonant with the law of one to an other self. It is far, far better to allow the experience to express itself in order that the entity may then make fuller use of this catalyst. End of quote. Okay, so ultimate balance, right? If you're looking at any situation experience within your purview, is there no emotional charge? If you're like really balanced, and I'm really trying to warn you that most people are not like this. I'm not necessarily like this, so don't expect perfection out of you, but we do need to understand the ideal so that we can better, integrate ourselves, I suppose, as to, somewhere closer to the truth. So you look at any situation, and any situation is like every other situation, which is that, hey, I am here, I am one with all. How may I serve? What can I do? Brother and sisters of sorrow, I am here to serve you. Is there something I can do for you? Is there some way I can inject love into this situation? Is there some way I can impart understanding? I can give a hug. I can anything that you think is service. Service comes in infinite forms. There's no checklist of things that equal service. It is really up to you and your individual self. You're a unique part of the universe, and therefore you will have a unique service. Will your service maybe be very similar or lame even, as like similar to someone else's service? Sure, it could be. Does your service have to be grand and magical and fancy? Absolutely not. Service is everywhere. Service is in front of your face. In fact, they say here, the Creator is all, and it's impossible not to serve. So how about you consider that everything within your reality is the Creator. Whether you serve yourself, you serve an other self, you're serving the Creator in some form or fashion. So once you come to that realization truly within the self, you can sort of be unswayed by certain types of emotional things in your environment, because you see that there's there's not necessarily a need in you to have that emotional reaction, because you've figured it out within yourself, and you've come to understanding and balance and acceptance within yourself as to these energies, and you know where they lie and where they come from. And so it's okay. You can just view it as an observer. And do you see an opportunity to serve, or do you not? That's it. That's a balanced entity. That's how you come to, I suppose, ultimate balance. But reminder, right? Ra said here in the last one ending, it is suggested that patience is requested, for the catalyst is intense upon your plane, and its use must be accepted over a period of consistent learning, which they also state in another quote, something about, patience for the self. You may only begin, and they say something like, we highlight, you may only begin to understand yourself. So it's okay. We're not here to completely figure out the whole universe and become 100% enlightened. We're here to, in third density, to learn the ways of the heart, to make our way to the heart chakra of love and understanding, compassion, but in a healthy way that, gets there through the bottom chakras, with respect for those chakras, honesty for those chakras, brutal honesty for the self as to why you react the way you react, and then eventually coming to a place of honest, pure love, right? I just would like to help other people, because in my life, I can see what's sort of important and what's not, what maybe is a finite thing versus an infinite thing. And, things of infinity are things of love and truth and beauty. I've heard it explained in other quo material of, that's channeled by the similar people here. They say something like, look through your day and the people that you interact with, and think about maybe at the end of your life what you'll remember and what you won't. And, the things that you're going to remember are the things that are infinite: the love, the relationships, the truth, the beauty, the deep understandings that, the revelations that come throughout life. Like, these are the things that are infinite. What you ate for breakfast and all this small details of the day are just that. They're finite details of the day. So, you can have the finite and the infinite. They're always interacting with each other, and you can basically bring the infinite into the finite world, right? We're in a finite world of details of the day. Well, what do you do here as an alchemist, as a seeker of love? Well, you come into the finite and the dirt and the muck and the mud, and what do? You make gold out of it. You make love out of it. You make light out of it. You transform the ugly into the beautiful. You be that example that you wish to see in the world. And through that, you reaffirm as to what it is that you live for, which is, you live for the Creator. You live for love and understanding and truth. And, you do that by being that example that you wish to see in the world. Okay, and then we'll just sort of finish up here with a final quote, which they ask Ra how to figure out where their blockages are. And I've already kind of explained a little bit about that, but I will let Ra give you a more specific answer. So they state here in session 4211, the questioner asks, how can an individual assess what energy centers within its being are activated and in no immediate need of further attention, and which energy centers are not activated and are in need of immediate attention? Ra answers, I am Ra. The thoughts of an entity, its feelings or emotions, and least of all, its behavior, are the signposts for the teach learning of the self by self. In the analysis of one's experiences of a diurnal cycle, an entity may assess what it considers to be inappropriate thoughts, behaviors, feelings, and emotions. In examining these inappropriate activities of the mind, body, and spirit complexes, the entity may then place these distortions in the proper vibrational ray and thus see where the work is needed. End of quote. So once again, just being a more realistic thing, how would you figure out where your blockages are? Go through your day at the end of the day. Sit down, think of all the things that you did and any sort of emotional signposts throughout your day that occurred that sort of brought your attention to that experience. Well, think about what you did, how you reacted, wherever you feel that you've sort of reacted inappropriately. Find the source within you. Ask yourself, where does this come from? Like, really, honestly, ask yourself, like you're talking to your higher self or whatever. Hey, self, please help me understand where this distortion, where this anger is coming from within me. Could you please reveal it to me? And, the answer may come immediately, it may not. But this is the thing, you ask and you will receive. And it is my understanding that if you keep the focus on wanting to find the answer to that question, over the next day, couple days, weeks, whatever, however long it takes, depends on how much you're focused on your will on getting that answer, it will be revealed to you. Like, it really will. It's just that you need to go within yourself and ask and be honest, right? You can't be like, well, how is this someone else's fault? No. How do I take responsibility within myself for this feeling and the way I reacted? How did I not react in love? The answer to that is where the chakra distortion lies within you, and it's probably going to be within one of the first three. So how does it relate to my survival? How does it relate to myself and how I feel about myself? And how does it relate to myself and other selves? How does it relate on a communal perspective in terms of maybe how people see me even, right? That's the communal self, things like this. So if you are aware that this is the way things are, you can do a lot of internal healing. And they do state here, which is kind of an interesting part, that they say, least of all, its behaviors are the signposts for learned teaching. So, you can kind of have crazy, outlandish behaviors in a way, because maybe that's you being spontaneous and that's just who you are. And that's the way that, this experience needs to lay itself out for you to learn whatever lessons you need to learn. That doesn't mean that you will do things seemingly negative that will come back to kick you in the butt. But there you go. There's the beauty of this life, is that you put things out there and the world will, react to them, and vice versa. You get to react to the world. And so it's your reaction, your perception of the world, which matters. What is stopping you from seeing things with the eyes of love? That is the answer. Wherever you find that answer is where your blockage is within you, is where you can find that you have work to do. And trust me, we all have work to do. This lower chakra blockage thing is not, in my opinion, something that you figure out and then you have done for the rest of your life. It is a daily task, my friends, of taking care of yourself and showing respect for the self. I go through little ups and downs, myself. I seem to be on a bit of an upswing right now, where, I've sort of gotten my life together in a seemingly cyclical fashion of discipline. So, waking up in the morning at a decent time, immediately getting to, taking care of, like, maybe drinking water and getting some food in my body. I've been exercising more, been like trying to sort of do internal type meditations more, gardening, like doing my sport, my skateboarding, which helps me to feel mentally healthy and sane. And I like to reflect honestly. And then, I also, this is lower chakra work is what I'm explaining. I also like to be a part of my community and, make sure that I'm sort of doing a decent job at my work and I feel comfortable there, and that I feel comfortable in, like, these podcasts and the way that I'm attempting to serve others and communicate my experiences. All of these types of things are lower chakra stuff. And what does that sound like to you? Well, it sounds like to me daily work, daily chores. And so it is a dailiness that we have to deal with this stuff. It just doesn't necessarily become easy. It becomes easy when you do it for maybe years and years at a time. And then sure, it can become easy. But until then, right, it's sort of like daily chores, daily work. You get these bare minimums done, and then you find you will have that energy to go into the heart, to try to really figure out yourself, to really figure out these perspectives. But if you don't have those basics figured out, you're not going to have the energy to go into the heart and do that shadow work, right? I didn't mention shadow work until now, but it really is what I've been explaining this whole time. When you're being brutally honest with yourself and trying to figure out how, other people's negative behavior in your life is somewhat, like, you gaslight yourself into, like, realizing that it's like your perception of them is the problem, not necessarily them, right? Like, both are true, don't get me wrong, but it's a brutal honesty and a brutal responsibility for the self that leads the self to teach the self. You can cope and project onto others as much as you want. In my opinion, those things will come back and teach you things. It's just sort of a longer route to the same ending. You might as well just take responsibility for the emotions and the reactions from self, and sooner than later. And the quicker you do that, the sooner you do that, I guess sort of the sooner that you're going to come to a truer balance within the self. So, my friends, very complicated, talking about emotions and how to navigate them, but I think that's good for today. So, thank you, my friends, so much for listening. If you appreciate this, please make sure to give it a like. That sort of shows me that you guys appreciate maybe the topics that I picked, or that it wasn't annoying to listen to the whole thing. Leave me a comment. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you want to hear future ones. And yeah, if you find value in this, I very much appreciate that you do, first of all, but I like to give all of this for free. It always turned me off when people want to charge money for spiritual stuff. I know that people are human and they gotta live and do their thing, but I can never quite get my head around that, even though I see the positives in it and blah, 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 blah. Point is that if you'd like to join my Patreon, I have some people there who are freely supporting me, right? They don't get anything from me other than just the fact that to know that they're helping me help you, or, get this information out to others, or however they see it. They're giving me that little bit of support so that I can keep doing this in a continual fashion. I am infinitely grateful. I'm so grateful, you guys. Thank you so much. It was the beginning of the month, And that Patreon money came through, and I had a whole bunch of stuff that I had to pay off, and oh my goodness, did it ever come at a good time. So anyways, sorry. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you. I love you. Take care. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the week.